Today, we're going to be talking about bike locks, and this comment comes from Carbon. Thank you for suggesting this video idea, and I present to you bike lock basics. If you ride a bike and you've wanted to stay your bike, chances are you're going to need a couple of bike locks. And today we're going to take a look at the 3 most popular bike locks and explain the pros and cons in each of them. Now for each type of bike lock, there's going to be good ones and there's going to be bad ones. And generally, the heavier ones are going to be the more secure ones. And no matter how secure a bike lock is, if a thief wants to get through your bike locks, they're going to find a way if they have the proper tools and they have the right amount of time. No bike lock is unbreakable. And all bike locks really do is buy you time, or kind of make the opportunistic thief go from one bike, your bike, to another bike. And without further ado, let's look at the 3 most popular types of bike locks. And for each type of bike lock, we're going to look at 3 main criteria for them. First is security, because that's an important thing to have in a bike lock. Second is weight, and third is ease of use. Now the 3 most popular type of bike locks, ranging from most secure to least secure, is the chain lock, then the U-lock, and the cable lock. So let's take a look at the chain lock. Now the chain lock is arguably the most secure type of bike lock out there. Weaker chain locks can usually be broken through with a good pair of bolt cutters and some muscle, but stronger chain locks usually need to be broken through with power tools. And the reason why they are the most secure is because they are made out of this hardened, heavy steel. These tend to be the most secure type of lock because when a thief tries to put an angle grinder to your chain lock, the chain lock tends to shift around and wiggle and makes it kind of difficult for them to get through the entire lock with their power tools. This makes them the most secure type of bike lock. Although they are the most secure, they are also the heaviest. This means that they will be very uncomfortable to transport this thing while you're riding your bike. A lot of people transport their chain locks by either looping it around their waist or looping it around their chest, but this still seems pretty uncomfortable. And since a lot of chain locks weigh between 6 to 10 pounds, depending on how long and how heavy duty your chain lock is, that's a lot of weight to be lugging around, and it isn't exactly the most comfortable thing to do. Although they are really heavy, the chain lock is pretty easy to use, and it is really easy to lock up your bike to an immovable object. And of course, the longer your chain is, the easier it is for you to lock up your bike, but with the longer chain, you're going to have more weight, and it's going to be more of a pain to lug around while you're riding. So to strike a nice flexibility to weight ratio, I would recommend going for around a 3-foot chain lock. And depending on how heavy duty it is, it's going to weigh about 10 pounds for a 3-foot chain lock. Again, these are the most secure, and they're pretty easy to use, but this comes at the cost of weight. The second most secure type of lock on our list is the U-lock. And I would say that U-locks are the most popular type of lock amongst commuters and people in the fixed gear crowd. And this is because they strike a pretty nice middle ground for weight and security. Like chain locks, thieves can get through lightweight U-locks with just hand tools like bolt cutters, but thieves will have to use power tools to get through a pretty heavy duty U-lock. And U-locks aren't as secure as chain locks because a U-lock pretty snugly locks up your bike to the rack, and thieves can easily just hold onto your U-lock and cut through it with their power tools. And because it's not as fidgety, it does make it a little less secure. But the upside to the U-lock is that it doesn't weigh nearly as much as a chain lock, and depending on the shackle length and strength, the U-lock will be more or less heavy and easier to transport around, and it will be more or less easier to lock up your bike. Now my pretty beefy but compact Abyss Granit X Mini U-lock here weighs in at about 4 pounds, and it offers a pretty good weight and portability to security ratio, which is why U-locks tend to be pretty popular. They're not too heavy to carry around, but they do keep your bike reasonably secure. And as far as transporting this thing goes, I usually just loop it onto my belt loop and kind of forget about it. You know, I just ride with it, get used to it, was just hanging on your belt loop, and it's not really too big of a deal to lug around. I even got 2 U-locks and a cable lock on my belt loops just because these locks are so much lighter, but we will get to that in a bit. Now the downfall of U-locks comes in the ease of use. Compared to chain locks and cable locks, U-locks are much more finicky to deal with, especially if you have a shorter shackle in the mini variations. It can be much harder to secure your rear wheel and your frame to the rack with the inflexible shackle compared to just looping a lock through your bike. Larger shackles will make it easier to lock up your bike, but in my opinion, it just adds unnecessary weight to your lock. In my experience, these 6 to 7 inch shackles are a bit harder to lock up than their standard counterparts, but the weight savings, in my opinion, are pretty worth it. So when looking at U-locks, it's really important to consider whether you value having an easier lock up or whether you value having an easier ride with the decreased weight of a mini shackle. In my opinion, I'd rather go with the mini shackle and just get good at locking up. U-locks offer a pretty nice middle ground for weight and security, but they can be a bit more difficult to lock up your bike. And the third type of lock on our list is, of course, the humble cable lock. There's a few different kinds of locking mechanisms for cable locks, but the general principle remains the same. You got a cable, you got a lock, you got a cable lock. Cable locks are the least secure out of any locks, and they can be easily cut with wire cutters. These are best used as a secondary lock to either lock up your front wheel or your saddle or other accessories that you might have on your bike. And it's best to use either a U-lock or a chain lock for your primary lock. That is, if you don't want your bike to get stolen, and who does want to get their bike stolen? That's not a fun time. Although cable locks aren't very secure, they are really light. This cable lock here is about this long, like 4 feet, and it weighs less than a pound. So of course it is really portable and really easy to carry around. And that's a pretty nice convenience to have for a secondary lock. Another thing about cable locks is that they're flexible. And they're easy to lock up your bike. Just don't use these as your primary lock. Light and easy to use, not very secure. So these are the 3 most popular types of locks that people use. Now, if you actually care about your lock, I would recommend that you use at least 2 good locks and spend at least $50. And if you can spend around $75, that's even better if you want to keep your bike. And as a general rule of thumb, the heavier the lock is, the more secure that your bike will be, but it will be more of a pain to lug around that lock. So it's really important to do your research and find that nice happy medium between security and portability. And if you'd like to see some proper locking technique, click the card above where I talk about college campus bike theft and how not to get your bike stolen. And this applies to anywhere, regardless if you're on a college campus or not. And with that, get some good decent locks, practice good locking technique, and don't get your bike stolen, because that's a bummer.